It's finally here, the moment you've been waiting for. You've built mountain after mountain, dealt with countless topples, and bumped into many rocks as you've trained for the tournament so you can be crowned the best at making Mountains Out of Molehills, which was designed by Jim DiCamillo and Marino and published by The Op, who helped sponsor this video. Hey everyone, I'm Mike Murphy of the Brothers Murph, and I'm here with BoardGameGeek.com. Now the Mountain Maker tournament is about to begin, but before you start making molehills, you need a plan. So let's get this game down to the table so we can teach you how to play Mountains Out of Molehills. In Mountains Out of Molehills, 2 to 4 players will be playing as moles trying to win the Mountain Maker tournament. They achieve this by drafting movement cards and then carefully planning the order in which they play them so they can move underground most effectively. As moles move, they push up the dirt, creating a mountain from the ground up. But beware, if you make a mountain too tall, it topples, which may or may not be to your advantage. But before we start building and toppling Mountains of Molehills, let's go over the setup. To play Mountains Out of Molehills, players must first assemble the 2-tier board which uses the game box. First, remove all pieces from the box. Place the box bottom in the center of the table. Next, take the underground board with the dirt pattern and place it inside the box. Be sure to use the side meant for the correct player count. One side shows a grid used for 3 to 4 player games and the other side is meant for a 2-player game. We'll use the 3 to 4 player side. Now place the 4 support pieces in the box corners. Once the supports are in place, you can place the above ground board, again making sure to use the side for the correct player count. Make sure the boards are rotated so the letters and numbers line up with each other to make for easy reference when moving and placing molehills. You now have a 2-tier board ready for use. The below ground board is where your moles will be tunneling and moving around, and the above ground board is where molehills will be pushed up to form mountains. Next, each player will choose a mole character standee to use and all of their molehill pieces of the same color. Also take the King of the Hill tokens up to the amount of players and randomly deal 1 out to each player to determine turn order. In turn order, players will place their mole in one of the starting corners underground. Each player can choose which direction to have their mole facing. Moles like to follow their nose, so whichever way their nose points, that's the direction they're headed. When selecting a corner to start in, make sure you're using the correct side of the game board, and note that in a 3-player game, players are working in a 5x5 grid and cannot use the outermost spaces on the board. Once each player has selected their starting corner, they place 1 molehill piece of their color on the space above their mole. Next, find the movement cards and shuffle them to create a face-down draw pile. Place the rock token and rock die near the playboard and make sure to leave some space near the game board to draw out a tableau of cards. The player who most recently dug a hole takes the score pad and becomes the scorekeeper for the game. Okay, so now I have my starting location, the beginnings of my very first molehill mountain, and I'm ready to go. The only problem is, it's a little dark down here and I can't see so good, so I'm going to need a plan if I'm going to move and build successfully. Luckily I've got some movement cards I can collect, so let's show you how a round plays out. Each round is broken up into 3 phases: card drafting, planning and movement, and then finally scoring and end of round. In the first phase, a player will draw out 5 cards for each player in the game, forming a tableau of cards on the table. Starting with the first player and proceeding in turn order, players take turns collecting 1 card at a time from the display. Players do this until everybody has 4 cards. Leftover cards are discarded from play. Each movement card shows different actions your mole will take. Some move the mole forward, while others cause the mole to turn left or right or make a U-turn. Other cards have movement and turning, and there are 2 types of special cards. More on that in a moment. Once each player has collected their cards, they need to make a plan of how they want to move. Each player will take their cards and place them in an order they want to carry them out. These cards should be collected into a stack. The stack of cards will be carried out from top to bottom, so it's important that you place your stack carefully. As moles move around, they will push up molehills in the new spaces they enter. Building and controlling these mountains are how players will score points. Once you've decided on the order of your cards, you will place your King of the Hill token on top of the card stack. At this point, you may no longer look at or rearrange your cards. Once everyone has made their plans, it's time to move and make molehills. Players will go in turn order, taking turns to carry out the first action card on top of their stack. Once each player has completed their first action card, the next action card is carried out in turn order until each player has played all 4 of their movement cards. There are several movement cards that help your mole navigate the underground board. There are movement cards that cause your mole to move 1, 2, or 3 spaces forward in the direction they are already facing. As a reminder, the mole will always move in the direction their nose is pointing. Each time your mole moves into a new space, a molehill is added to the corresponding space on the above ground board. Mountains are built from the bottom up, so molehills are always placed on the lowest possible part of a mountain. If no molehill is present on that space, the player places their molehill to start a mountain. If any future molehills are added, they will be placed on the bottom of the stack. When it comes time to score, whichever player has their molehill piece on the bottom of a mountain, they are considered to be in control of that mountain. Now it's important to note that the judges of the Mountain Maker tournament don't want moles building too high, too fast, so in each round of play there's a limit on how high mountains can be. If you exceed this height, the mountain topples. This could be disastrous, or it could topple a mountain in your favor. When a mountain gets too tall, it topples. In the first round, a mountain cannot be taller than 2 molehills, but in later rounds the limit of mountain heights increases. When a mountain topples, be sure to first add your molehill piece to the bottom of the mountain. You now choose which direction it will topple and spread. The bottom piece stays in the same space and the next piece is spread to other spaces. The next piece in the stack is placed on the next space in the direction you chose. All pieces above are placed going in the same direction, one piece for every space until the mountain pieces have all been toppled. If a mountain topples and pieces fall off the edge of the board, all remaining molehill pieces are returned to the players who belong to those pieces. At times, a toppling mountain can cause other mountains to be too tall, which will result in them toppling as well. The active player will control any and all topples that occur as a result of the current movement card being played. Mountains will continue to topple until every mountain on the above ground board is at the maximum height or lower. While moving around underground, there are a couple things to be aware of. Moles are notoriously polite, and if they run into another mole, they will stop and lose any extra movement while their fellow mole is in their way. If a mole ever reaches the edge of the board, they will also stop their movement before going off the edge. Make sure to pay attention to where the edge of the board is based on your current player count. Moles at times will want to turn, and there are movement cards that allow a player to turn left or right or even make a U-turn. Note that if a mole turns without moving into a new space, a molehill is not added to that space. Molehills are only added into new spaces as moles move into them. There are also cards that allow for turning and movement. If a card shows movement and a turn, the player may choose whether to move and then turn or whether to turn and then move. The last two movement cards are a little different. The rock cards allow you to place the rock into any empty space on the underground board. You will also roll the rock die and place it on the rock. This rock becomes an obstacle that blocks a mole's movement, even your own. In addition, when a mole bonks into a rock, they become disoriented and they turn in the direction showing on the rock die. Finally, there are mole cards which allow a player's mole to peek above ground. They don't move in this instance, but peeking causes the mountain above them to topple in the direction that the player chooses. Players will move and make mountains, placing molehills until everyone has played all 4 movement cards. It's now time to score. During scoring, players look to see whose color molehill is on the bottom of each mountain. This player has control of the mountain and scores 1 point for each molehill in that mountain, regardless of which other colors may be stacked above it. The player assigned a scorekeeper will track all points gained. Once all points have been gained, the players look to see which player has the most molehill pieces on the tops of mountain. This player gets to choose which King of the Hill token first. They might choose to be the first player in the next round, which gives them the best chance at drafting the cards they want, or they might choose to be the last in turn order, so they get the final chance to play a movement card and cause a timely topple. In later rounds, the maximum heights of mountains goes higher, with the final round having a max height of 5. This allows players to build and topple bigger mountains, potentially gaining them larger scores. After the 6th round, the game comes to an end and it's time to declare the winner of the Mountain Maker tournament. Players will tally their scores from all 6 rounds and the player with the highest score is the winner. If there's a tie, the player that has the most mountains with 5 molehills in their control is the winner. If there's still a tie, players check to see which player controls the most mountains with 4 molehills and so on, and if after all that players are still somehow tied, all tied players share the victory. And that is how you play Mountains Out of Molehills. This game comes down to careful planning and cunning sabotage in the form of well-placed rocks and well-timed topples. If you play your cards right, you might find yourself the mightiest mole of them all and be crowned the winner. And if you want to learn more about Mountains Out of Molehills, be sure to check out its page at BoardGameGeek.com. And until next time, I'm Mike Murphy. I've been here with BoardGameGeek, and that is how you play Mountains Out of Molehills. Have a great day.